passed WSET level 3 with distinction and found out that actually it's way easier than they tell you at school. So today I'm going to walk you through the whole process of the tasting exam, the whole SAT, with all the tips and tricks I've learned along the way so that you can get your distinction grade even if there is a couple of days left before the exam. The first thing you need to know is that you actually need to learn only about half of the SAT lexicon. So in the SAT card you have a lot of descriptors, a lot of categories, but half of them is just desirable thing that a WSET 3 qualified sommelier should know, but it's not necessary to get the distinction grade. The first category that we have is clarity, and we don't have to evaluate it. There won't be any hazy wines at the day of the exam, so you just ignore that. You don't need to mention in the exam sheet that the wine is clear. The next step, intensity, and here we use different techniques to identify the intensity of white or red wine. For white wines, everything is quite simple. You just incline the glass and try to see the point to which the color reaches. If the wine is almost transparent, like water, have almost no color, then the intensity is pale. If the color reaches more or less the half of the liquid in the glass, but the rim has no color, then the intensity is medium. And if the white wine is equally colored, there is no big difference between the color of the wine on the rim and near the bottom of the bowl, then the color is deep. But things get a bit more challenging with red wines, and here is why. At some schools, they teach you to evaluate color intensity of red wine the same way as with white wines, and this method has the right to live, but I personally prefer another method which to me seems easier and less ambiguous, so there is less chance to make a mistake using it. So instead of inclining the glass, you just put it on a white napkin on the table and you look straight down at the wine in the bowl of the glass. If you cannot see the stem, the wine is deep colored. If you kinda see the stem but it's not very clear, you put medium, and if you see the stem no problem, then the wine is pale. I think this method is more secure because you define without any doubt the intensity here. If you cannot see the stem, so you just cannot physically see it, there is no ambiguity here, you either see it or not, right? If you can see it clearly, then also there is no problem. If you can see it but not like very clearly and in doubt, then it is medium. So using this technique, you will surely get this point for color intensity for both white and red wines. Then we go to the color. Again, there won't be any rosé wines on the day of the exam, so you should not learn all the grades of the rosé wine. Of course, as a sommelier, you probably already know what the colors of the rosé wine might be, but you won't get any marks for it on the WSET 3 tasting exam. Harsh truth. So any wine has like basic color setting, meaning the majority of the red wines in the world are ruby and the majority of the white wines in the world are lemon. So if you're completely lost and don't know what to put in the exam sheet, you can test your luck and try one of these. At least you have a decent chance, like mathematically. To me, this part was extremely challenging during my exam because I'm colorblind, not completely, like I cannot distinguish the red color of the traffic lights from the green one, but like the tones, especially in the greenish, brownish areas, may be tricky for me. And in order not to make a mistake and get my point here, I designed a method to judge the wine colors. Let's break it down, starting with white wines. So the basic setting is lemon. Right? I can describe it as a white wine color. Maybe it's not quite professional, but it will definitely help you at the exam. If you ask a person who is not into wine, what's this color? He will answer, it's white wine color, then it is lemon. Now, if we add a little bit of green color to it, like green apple to it, then it becomes lemon green. The presence of green is quite obvious, right? Then we have gold, which is basically a step up from lemon, and then it translates to normal language as yellow. If the wine is yellow, we write gold in the exam sheet. It may sound as I'm oversimplifying the things here, but it's actually true. Then we have amber. It's like more than gold, more serious color. Most likely it's a barrel-aged white wine because white wines gain color during barrel aging, while red wines lose color during aging. And brown, it's like a very rare, probably some sherry, Pedro Jimenez, could be brown, but there is a little to no chance that you will have a brown white wine on the day of the exam. Now about the red wine. The basic setting here is ruby, so we are judging from ruby. To me, ruby is the synonym to red as a most basic color. If the wine is red, then it is ruby. Now, if we add a little bit of blue to ruby, then we get purple. These wines always have this characteristic bluish tint, very hard to make a mistake here. If we add a bit of brick color to ruby wine, you know, a color of brick used to make houses, then we have garnet. Again, plenty of red garnet wines, especially aged ones, high probability to encounter. Then we have tawny. It's more than garnet, like ruby with lots of this brick color, and actually it could be only tawny port wine. I cannot recall any other red wines with tawny color actually, but you won't get a fortified wine on the day of the exam, so it won't be a rosé, it won't be a sparkling wine, neither it will be a fortified wine. It could be dry, it could be sweet, but it won't be fortified. So basically you can skip the category of tawny for reds as well as brown. I don't know any red wines which are brown, probably some past its best ones, but again, you won't have them at the day of the exam, so don't worry. Summing up the color. 4 options for white: lemon green, lemon, gold and amber, and just 3 for reds: purple, ruby and garnet. Skipping other observations and condition categories straight away because you won't get any marks for noticing like legs or tears in the wine, neither you will have an unclear wine at the day of the exam, so we are going straight to the intensity on the nose. And by the way, if you are preparing for your WSET tasting exam right now, you can book an online session with me so that I could explain you in person each and every trick you have to know in order to pass the tasting exam with distinction. You can book a call using the link in the description down below. Otherwise, you have all the information here for free so that you don't have to pay me a penny. Now, wine intensity on the nose. Here goes a huge hack. It seems like we have 5 categories here, like light, medium minus, medium, medium plus, and pronounced. But in fact, primarily we have to pick one out of these 3 categories: light, medium or pronounced. Because if we take all of the wines which exist in the world, we'll have roughly like 33% of light wines, 33% of medium intensity wines and 33% of pronounced intensity wines. And then we make a decision. We take the glass and put our nose into the bowl. We don't inhale now. If we can hear the smell of the wine even without inhaling, then the wine is pronounced. The intensity of the wine is pronounced. The smell is so strong that even without inhaling, you can hear it, right? Then, if you smell nothing, you try to inhale a bit and only here you hear the smell, then it is medium. And even if inhaling you smell nothing or almost nothing, then the intensity is light. And only now, if you've decided that the wine is medium intensity, we like zoom into this category and decide if it is medium minus, medium plus, or just medium. But once again, these are not equal categories. You have 33% of light wines, light intensity wines, 11% of medium minus wines, 11% of medium wines, 11% of medium plus wines, and again 33% of pronounced wines, so just keep that in mind. And a little insight. The examiner, who is often your educator at the wine school, can mark 2 options as correct. Sometimes, even for an examiner, it could be hard to identify if the wine is medium or like medium minus intensity, so in the correct answer sheet he can put 2 options. So if you write medium, you get the mark, and if you write medium minus, you also get the mark. Of course, you have to write only one option. You should never write medium to medium minus or stuff like that. That will definitely be a wrong answer. So it's just an information for you to relax and have a bit more security when making a decision. Because we are all humans, we have different palates, and obviously a sommelier have to distinguish a light wine from a pronounced one, but this medium category is a bit tricky and quite subjective, and examiners can also be in doubt sometimes. And remember, red wines are generally more intense than white wines, so we compare white wines with white wines and reds with reds. There are like 2 intensity scales, don't mix them up. Then we go to the most tricky and significant part, where we get the majority of the points: primary, secondary and tertiary descriptors. Let's start with the primary aromas. Primary aromas are determined by the grape varieties, so these are the inherent properties of the grapes. Obviously, for red and white wines we use different descriptors, and now we'll discuss each of them. In white wines, we start with floral, which to me was a very confusing category because you have here really a lot of different descriptors, most of which are very hard to identify. You never know if it's honeysuckle or elderflower or geranium or whatever, so I just suggest writing blossom because it is the most common descriptor in this group. If there is something floral in the wine, the examiner will 100% put blossom as a correct answer because blossom is like everything, any kind of blossoming tree or blossoming flower. So don't overcomplicate things. If you smell something floral, write blossom. You will definitely get your mark for this. Then we have green fruit, also quite a lot of descriptors, but the most common are apple and pear. Green apple has a very characteristic aroma, very frequent in wines, especially in lightest wines like Sauvignon Blanc or something. So if you can smell quince, go ahead and write quince, but apple and pear are the most secure ones here, present in almost any white wine. Coming up next are citrus fruits. Lime and lemon are the most common ones here, and if you smell one of them, you can definitely write the other one as well because they smell very similar, and if there is lime, obviously there is lemon. Anyway, at WSET 3 you don't lose marks for writing incorrect descriptors, so there is no big deal anyway if the examiner puts lemon without lime in the answer sheet. Then we got stone fruit. Peach and nectarine here is the same couple as lime and lemon for citrus. They go like hand in hand and smell very similar too. And here I would highlight apricot as well, because apricot has a very characteristic aroma. It's hard to be mistaken with apricot. It is present in a lot of white wines, in sweet white wines as well. It is a nice descriptor to write down. And then we have tropical fruit. Here you have more options. Personally, I smell passion fruit rather often in white wines, especially wines from like warm climate or made from aromatic grape varieties. Also mango, sometimes banana, especially from whole bunch fermentation. But if you want to stay in the safe zone for tropical fruit, I'd suggest using mango or passion fruit. These are the most characteristic aromas, at least for me. And always think in terms of categorizing the wine, like the wine will probably not have all these categories. Green fruit up to tropical fruit, right? Because greenish aromas are normally derived from cooler climates, and on the other hand, more ripe tropical aromas from warmer climates. As a consequence, you cannot have an overly ripe white wine with 14% ABV and mango aromas along with green apple aromas. It's just quite illogical. So if you decide if the wine feels thin, probably it is cool climate, low alcohol, high acidity, probably we should look for descriptors in some lighter categories like green fruit, citrus. If the wine feels more strong, then probably we should look for some stone fruit, some tropical fruit. It's not a rule of thumb, but it gives you the understanding where are we and what we should expect from the wine rather than just rely totally on our taste buds and our nose. I believe that wine is a very logical product and we can break it down using our knowledge about it, and like this we'll be stronger as sommeliers compared to people who just only trust their feelings. And then we go for primary descriptors for red wines. In red wines, we have to decide either we are on the black or the red side. I mean, black fruit or red fruit. Red fruit are represented by lighter aromas like strawberry, raspberry, red cherry, red plum. Black fruits are black plum, black cherry, bramble in most cases, but here you have a tip. If you're not quite sure if it is a black cherry or a red cherry, and indeed it's very hard to distinguish, then it won't be a mistake to write both. Why? Because like this you tick two categories of the descriptors, red fruit and black fruit, and like this you elevate your chances of getting all the points. Again, at level 3 you don't lose marks for incorrect answers, so don't hesitate and write both cherries and plums if you smell one. It doesn't work with any descriptors, the majority of them you cannot use interchangeably, but lemon lime, black cherry, red plum, black plum, and like peach nectarine are the most common ones and secure ones. And then we have dried and cooked fruit. This category is a bit tricky because these are still primary descriptors, but these aromas may be derived from bottle aging, and in this case they will be tertiary. What should you do here? Write them in the primary or in the tertiary if you taste some, I don't know, raisin or prune. Well, raisin is raisin, prune is prune, it doesn't matter if it is primary or secondary prune. The same goes for chocolate. Chocolate may be secondary from barrel aging and it may be tertiary from oxidation, but chocolate is chocolate anyway. You just write chocolate for secondary, for tertiary, for anything, because you cannot identify where this chocolate came from. And once again, it won't be a mistake to put this prune or this chocolate anyway. And then we go for herbaceous aromas. The most frequent descriptor here is grass, I'd say, but generally it is not the most popular category of aromas in wine. Some nice Chilean Carmenere may have a very strong aroma of blackcurrant leaf, but these are more nuances. If you are not completely sure that one of these herbaceous aromas is present, probably you could just skip this group. Then herbal, more or less the same as herbaceous. These are additions like cherry on top of the cake, but definitely not the core descriptors of any wine. You may smell some mint sometimes lavender, but these are not the easiest ways to get the mark for. Punch and spice is more or less the same. Probably licorice may be characteristic for some wines, but again, it is not the easiest decision to get the mark. So yeah, basically you decide either it is about black or red fruit, or both, black and red fruit. And for white wines, you decide where are we on this spectrum from green fruit to tropical fruit. And then if you want, you can add some decorations to it, like herbal or herbaceous descriptors. Sounds okay? Great. Now we are going for secondary aromas. These are the aromas which occur in the winery. For red wine, it is only oak, like barrel aging. For white wines, it may be barrel aging, malolactic conversion, or lees contact. Oak in red wine, in like 85% of the cases, gives close and smoke. Sometimes charred wood, which is basically a synonym for smoke. So you just memorize these two descriptors and you're good to go if you taste some oak in red wine. In white wine, these two key descriptors are vanilla and toast. Toast is more or less the same what is smoke for red wines, named a bit differently, but generally it is the same characteristic aroma. And vanilla, it is also very typical sweet aroma, which is not hard to identify in the white wine, which undergone barrel aging, especially if the oak was new. Then for the lees. Lees is a component of bread, right? So if you smell something related to bread, like brioche bread pastry, it is lees contact. Malolactic conversion is basically the transition of a malic acid present in lemon to lactic acid present in yogurt. So we are looking for some milk-ish aromas like butter or cream. If you smell it, it means that the wine undergone malolactic conversion. And for the tertiary aromas now, these are not derived from the grapes, these are not made in the winery, these are made after the wine leaves the winery, so basically these are the aromas of bottle aging. Tertiary aromas may have either oxidative, either fruit or bottle development nature. The most commonly used descriptors to state the oxidative nature of a wine are almond and marzipan, which are synonyms because marzipan is made from almonds, and also caramel. And obviously we are talking about white wines now, so either some nutty character, which to me smells in most of the cases like almonds, either some caramel notes. Basically any nutty smell may tell you that the wine was oxidized to some extent, but to me almond has the most characteristic smell. Very hard to mix up with something else, so I just stick to this descriptor. Then we have fruit development, which is basically dried everything for what you could have in the primary aromas category. So if in the primary you had pear, in the tertiary after some time in the bottle it becomes dried pear. If you had mango, it converts into dried mango in the tertiary. Basically, dried fruit aromas are more concentrated, more sweet, and you easily identify if it is a fresh fruit or a dried one, so you shouldn't have any difficulties here. And then bottle aging is kind of the same process like oxidation, because during bottle aging, a very small amount of oxygen penetrates through the cork and interacts with the wine. As a consequence, bottle-aged descriptors are quite similar to oxidation character descriptors. I advise using nutty and honey, because nutty is like the most common. You don't have to specify the nut, you just say nutty, you just write nutty, and that's already a mark gained. For Riesling, if you are 100% sure that that is Riesling, you might smell some petrol. To me, it is the smell of a gas station, the smell when you get when you put gas into the tank of your car. For some people, it smells more like a plastic toy, newly opened, like Chinese plastic toy, this kind of stuff. But aged Riesling is a very characteristic wine, and you basically get those petrol notes only there in aged Riesling. For red wines, it is a bit easier because you don't have these oxidative character descriptors, so you just have fruit development, something dried, something cooked, and then bottle age, which in red wines may assume different forms. What I personally get in the vast majority of bottle aged red wines is forest floor, mushrooms, leaves, and earth, which are also variations of more or less the same smell of like forest, leaves, mushrooms, very similar. Sometimes you get leather or tobacco, and I think it covers like 80% of the possible smells you can get. Obviously, you can get way more, but now we are talking about this standard WSET 3 approach, so we don't need to invent sophisticated things here, we just need to have maximum marks, right? About the intersections between secondary and tertiary aromas like chocolate, we have already spoken. If you smell chocolate, it doesn't matter that you have to identify if it is secondary chocolate or tertiary chocolate, just write chocolate. Okay. And finally, we are done with primary, secondary, and tertiary descriptors, and now we have to state the development of the wine. The development equals the presence of tertiary aromas. As simple as that. If there are no tertiary aromas in the wine, then the wine is youthful. If there are some tertiary aromas, but the wine in general has more of the primary and secondary descriptors, then it is developing. And if tertiary aromas prevail over all of the other aromas, then the wine is fully developed. So on this stage, you don't have to taste the wine one more time, you just look what you have, what you previously written, and based on that information, you assess the development. Very simple, takes no time, very easy mark to get if you got right the presence of tertiary aromas. That is crucial. You may be even wrong about the particular descriptors, but if you understood well that there are tertiary aromas, which frankly speaking is very hard not to identify, then you get the mark for development. Okay, that is it with the nose, now the palate, and first we have sweetness. A shortcut here is that the majority of the wines in the world are dry. It is the same hack that you use with colors. If you're completely lost and cannot identify the color, you just write ruby for red and lemon for white. In the similar situation for sweetness, you can write just dry, and like this you'll have more mathematical probability of getting the point, but of course that is not the way you should do it on the day of the exam. The biggest advice here is to just try wines with different sugar content and memorize the feeling in the mouth, because we are all humans, we are all different, and our palate perceives sweetness also differently. We consume different amounts of sweet things in our day-to-day lives, so the feeling like of 10 grams of sugar per liter of wine for me might be different from yours. So there is no other option than just try and memorize how does dry wine, off-dry wine, medium dry wine, and so forth taste for you. Basically, the only difficulty here may be to distinguish dry from off-dry wine, because this tiny bit of sugar may be quite confusing. But here you just have to memorize the feeling, nothing more to be said, and for medium sweet, medium dry, and sweet it is quite clear, I believe. Luscious is when a wine is so sweet that it becomes more dense, almost like a syrup. These wines are not very common as well, but occasionally you might get one of them on the day of the exam. The next parameter is acidity. I'll tell you one hack here, which might not be very pleasant to look at, but will 100% give you the understanding of how to evaluate acidity without any mistakes. So you sip the wine, spit it into the spittoon, and then you open the mouth looking down at the table. Acidity causes a lot of saliva in the mouth, and if there is so much saliva that is ready to drop out of the mouth, then you understand that the acidity is high. Of course, you can do the same thing without opening the mouth in order not to terrify your classmates, but that's the best way to evaluate acidity. Please use it. If there is no saliva after the wine, then the acidity is low, and there are also these like middle ranges, which are the trickiest parts and the hardest points to get, but for high and low, I get you covered. If it's not high enough, neither low, then you have to look in this medium range, as always. And for the tannins, obviously we don't evaluate tannins for white wines. That is why for white wines tasting we get a maximum of 20 marks, and for red wines we get 21 marks. The most sensitive for tannins area in the mouth is this area above the gums, so make sure to cover it with some wine. while tasting. And here, yeah, you just get used to the tannin sensation in your mouth when tasting those like 70, 65 wines at the school. So just trust your palate. That is it. And for alcohol, there are different scales for evaluating alcohol content in still wines and fortified wines. The scale for fortified wines, you just have to memorize it for a theory exam, because there is a huge chance that you will get one question in the multiple choice section about that. But the scale for still wines is way more important, because it serves not only for the theory exam, but also for the tasting part. Basically, alcohol is low when its content is below 11%, medium stands for the range from 11 to 13.9% ABV, and 14% and above is high alcohol. The sense of alcohol is like a burning sensation in the mouth when tasting a wine, so by the intensity of this burning sensation we evaluate the alcohol content. The good news is that on the day of the exam you won't get any tricky wines with 14% alcohol, because 14% is already high, but like 13.9% it would be medium. The same with 11%. The examiners are not so cruel, so it will be most probably like 10.5 for low alcohol, 12 for medium, and 14.5, 15 for high. These are the significant steps, and the burning sensation from 10% ABV is totally different than from 12.5%, so you just have to train your palate first and then trust it, as simple as that. The next thing up is the body of the wine, which is also purely an analogical parameter. What I mean by that is that you have to analyze all the components that contribute to the body, or vice versa, make it thinner and then make a decision. Basically, acidity makes the body thinner, sugar makes it bigger, tannins and alcohol also make it bigger. So you just analyze these four components and just shoot your shot. If there is a lot alcohol and tannins in red wine, it has medium acidity and it's dry, what the body will be definitely full. On the opposite, if there is a lot of acidity but not that much of sugar, tannin and alcohol, the body will seem thin. Another analogy you can use here is a question: does the wine feel like water or like cream? Because cream is very rich, dense, has a good structure, and water it's just like water, totally liquid. If the wine feels like oil or like cream in the mouth by its texture, then we have full body here. If the wine seems like water, then the body is thin. And it works for white wines as well, except that white wines don't have tannins. So far so clear? Great! Flavor intensity now. Basically, flavor intensity is somehow similar to aroma intensity. There is little to no chance to encounter a wine which is super intense on the nose, but it's not intense at all on the palate. There could be some slight differences. For example, flavor intensity is a bit more intensive. Anyway, you got what I mean? And it's a good sign if a wine promises less on the nose and gives you more on the palate. It is a good sign for overall quality assessment at the end of the SAT. On the contrary, if the wine promises on the nose more than it gives on the palate, probably it is not a very good sign, meaning that probably it's just a well-made wine and not a high-quality wine. But anyway, flavor intensity should be more or less similar to aroma intensity, which we have already determined previously. Then we jump on to the flavor characteristics. Basically, what we do here is just copy all the descriptors that we've determined on the nose, because some notes are more pronounced on the palate, some on the nose, but anyway, these are all present. So you just copy that, and if you taste something additionally, you can write that down too. Normally, examiners like if a student write some couple, maybe 3 more descriptors on the palate than on the nose, but it's not necessary at all. If you feel like putting something extra, if the wine really tastes like chocolate and you somehow haven't noticed this chocolate on the nose, sure, go ahead and write, but it's not a prerequisite, I'd say. And for the finish category, the decision is very simple. It's basically an answer to the question: how long does the wine last in the mouth, or how fast does the taste disappear? If the taste lasts only like 2 seconds, the finish is short. If it lasts 12 plus seconds, then it is long. You can literally count how fast does the taste disappear from your mouth and then make a decision. And the final 2 categories, starting with the quality level of a wine. Again, this is totally analytical. You already have all the necessary data to answer these questions. You won't have poor wines on the day of the exam, because in order to name the wine poor, it should have some obvious flaws or some trichloroanisole or something. On the WSET 3 level, you won't have such wine, so basically the basic evaluation is acceptable. And then you can go for good, very good and outstanding if the wine matches 4 criteria: balance, intensity, complexity and length. So balance means that all the components like acidity, sugar, alcohol, etc. in the wine are balanced and nothing stands out drastically. There are some options when a great, complex, intense, very high quality wine could not be balanced yet, which might happen with some, I don't know, great Bordeaux wines, for instance. So these wines just need some more years in the bottle to round up and become more balanced. But again, what is the probability that you will get such wine at the day of the exam? It's actually very, very low. So don't be distracted. In 99.9% of the cases, you will get a balanced wine, which already means that it is acceptable. Just look up what you've written in the aroma and flavor descriptors, and if there is a bunch of different descriptors from different categories like primary, secondary and tertiary, then you tick this box and decide that the wine is complex enough. Then for the intensity, exactly the same thing. You look up what you've written for flavor and aroma intensity and make a decision. If in doubt, remember that if the wine promises less on the nose than it gives on the palate, it is a good sign. So if you're not quite sure if the wine is intense or not intense for this final assessment, just compare flavor and aroma intensity. If on the nose it is less than on the palate, you can tick this box. And the last one is length. Basically, it is another name for the finish. If the wine has long finish, then it matches this parameter. And now you count how many out of these 4 criteria does this wine satisfy. If only 1, which is more likely balance, then the wine is acceptable. If 2, good, 3, very good, and all 4, outstanding. And the last mark in the tasting exam goes for identifying the level of readiness for drinking. You won't have any past its best wines or too young wines, so basically you choose from only 2 options. Drink now, not suitable for aging or further aging, or can drink now but has potential for aging. To correctly identify this one, think in terms of bottle aging. Will this wine benefit from another 3, 5, 7 years in the bottle? Important, will it become better or it will stay the same? Staying the same and not developing any new tertiary aromas is just shelf life, not potential for aging, so don't be confused by that. So you basically evaluate, does this wine have enough primary aromas to convert into tertiary, and will it be beneficial for overall quality of the wine? If it is a youthful, young wine, indeed it has plenty of primary aromas, but they won't convert into tertiary because this wine wasn't meant to be aged. So it will be left with no freshness after 5 years in the bottle, meaning it will be left with nothing. On the other hand, if the wine has already seen some oak, maybe spent a couple of years in the bottle, and generally it is a high quality wine, which you understand from all of the previous assessment, in this case it will benefit from further aging. I hope that this guide helped you to clarify some of the issues related to the WSET 3 tasting exam. If there are any questions left, feel free to book a private session with me to consolidate the knowledge and get the personal approach for the 100% readiness for the exam, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.